On a freezing winter night in Aspen Ridge, the hospital was calm. Just soft footsteps, flickering monitors, and weary staff waiting for morning. But everything changed when a massive snow leopard, white as moonlit snow, stumbled through the front doors, bleeding heavily from her paw. Her breaths were ragged. Her fur was matted with ice and blood. Yet her silver eyes burned with a desperate, almost human plea. Everyone froze. Doctors stepped back. Security reached for alarms. No one understood why this wild predator had appeared inside a hospital, or why she collapsed at the feet of a tiny blonde girl in a pink pastel coat, placing a trembling paw on the child's boot, as if begging her, and only her. Within seconds, the quiet lobby erupted into panic, and what this wounded mother was about to reveal would shake Aspen Ridge to its core. If you want to know how a dying snow leopard trusted a child to save her unborn cubs and uncovered a danger hiding in the mountains, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because this is a story you will never forget. Winter in Aspen Ridge was the kind of winter that made even the tallest pine trees bow their heads. The small mountain city, tucked between steep Colorado cliffs and dense forests, was buried under a heavy quilt of snow that hadn't stopped falling for 3 days straight. Street lamps glowed like lonely fireflies in the storm, their light swallowed by the swirling flakes. The wind pushed down from the ridges like a living creature, cold, sharp, merciless, scratching across windows, rattling loose gutters, and leaving the air tasting of ice and iron. Down on Main Street, the Aspen Ridge Medical Center stood like a glass beacon in the blizzard, its wide lobby windows glowing gold against the night. It was here, wrapped in the warm hum of radiators and overhead lights, that little Lily Parker walked beside her mother, unaware that something impossible was waiting behind the sliding doors. Lily, only 8 years old, had the delicate look of a porcelain doll, her hair blonde and slightly curled at the ends, falling around a pair of thoughtful blue eyes. She always wore her favorite pastel pink coat, soft, puffy, smelling faintly of cinnamon from her mother's car freshener. Her brown boots thumped lightly on the tile as she held her worn teddy bear to her chest. Though shy with strangers, she was naturally gentle, a child who hugged animals too tightly and apologized to bugs when she accidentally stepped on them. Her mother, Rebecca Parker, walked beside her with a practiced grace. At 33, Rebecca was a striking woman, tall, slender, with warm olive skin and long dark brown hair tied neatly behind her back. She wore a bright red designer trench coat that contrasted fiercely against the white world outside. The subtle confidence in her posture came from years of working as a financial strategist in Denver. But tonight, her expression was softened by worry as she guided Lily toward the hospital's reception desk for the girl's routine winter checkup. Normally, Aspen Ridge Medical Center was peaceful at this hour. A few nurses finishing dinner, a receptionist tapping lightly on a keyboard, the faint beep of distant machines. But the moment Lily and Rebecca stepped into the glass lobby, the atmosphere snapped like a brittle twig. A heavy thud echoed from the entrance, then another. The automatic doors shuddered violently as something massive pushed through them. The warm, recycled air of the hospital collided with a gust of frigid wind, and then a shape emerged from the storm. At first, it looked like a drifting ghost, a blur of white fur matted with clumps of snow. But when it stepped under the lobby lights, the truth froze everyone in place. A full-grown snow leopard, one so rare it belonged more in fables than in Colorado mountains, was dragging itself across the polished floor. Her coat, usually pristine white speckled with smoky rosettes, was streaked with dirt and blood. Every breath rasped painfully through her chest. Her powerful shoulders trembled with each step, and from her left front paw, a line of crimson droplets spilled behind her like a broken thread. Nurses gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" A security guard reached for the emergency radio, but before anyone could react further, the Leopard, later known as Nova, lifted her head. Her eyes were a startling pale silver, wide with agony yet impossibly intelligent. Those eyes swept past the adults, past the frightened staff, and locked directly onto Lily. Lily froze, her small hand tightening around Rebecca's. "Mom," she whispered, voice barely a thread. Rebecca immediately stepped in front of her daughter, her instincts as sharp as the winter wind. "Stay behind me, Lily." She raised her chin, her expression steeled, though fear trembled faintly at the edge of her lips. But Nova didn't snarl. She didn't bare her teeth. Instead, she limped forward, slow, deliberate, as though each step carved pain into her bones. The tension in the room thickened to the point of suffocation. The Leopard reached Lily. Then, with a sound halfway between a whimper and a plea, Nova's legs buckled. She collapsed onto the cold tile, her massive body shuddering. Lily's eyes widened as the Leopard lifted one trembling paw and gently placed it on Lily's brown boot. A bloody, desperate touch. A request. A cry for mercy. Lily's breath hitched. Her knees trembled. But something ancient and tender stirred inside her. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "She's scared. And she's hurting." Rebecca's face went pale as she saw it. The jagged remains of a broken hunting arrow embedded deep into Nova's paw, the flesh around it swollen and angry. She opened her mouth to call for animal control, when Nova suddenly let out a low, heartbreaking sound. Not a growl, a cry. Lily slowly reached out a shaking hand. Nova lowered her head, surrendering completely, pressing her blood-matted forehead into Lily's palm. And in that fragile, impossible silence, the air inside the emergency wing felt strangely heavy, thickened by fear, cold drafts from the lobby, and the unspoken realization that everyone present had stepped into something far larger than they understood. Snow still clung to Nova's fur in melting clumps, leaving small puddles on the tile floor. The great snow leopard lay partially curled, her sides rising and falling in short, strained breaths. Lily's small fingers were still pressed against the animal's forehead, and Nova's silvery eyes remained half-closed, as if the girl's touch alone anchored her to life. Rebecca's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She had always been a woman of logic. Her career in finance had sharpened her instincts until every decision in her life carried the weight of risk analysis. But nothing in spreadsheets, stock charts, or market volatility had ever prepared her for this moment. Her tiny daughter and a wounded apex predator choosing each other with inexplicable certainty. Doctors rushed into the lobby, drawn by the commotion. The first was Dr. Marcus Hale, the hospital's night trauma physician. In his early 40s, Marcus was tall and broad-shouldered, with a square jaw darkened by stubble and deep-set hazel eyes that always looked one step ahead of disaster. His navy scrubs clung slightly to a muscular frame built from years of volunteer mountain rescue work. He was a calm man by nature, though grief had carved a subtle weariness into him. Losing a rescue partner in an avalanche 3 years earlier had taught him to fear winter in ways he never admitted out loud. "Everybody step back," he ordered, voice steady but projecting tension. "Security, Call animal control now. But as he approached Nova, the snow leopard lifted her head, a guttural warning rumbling deep in her chest. Her ears flattened, muscles tensed. Marcus froze. Lily, trembling but resolute, whispered, "She doesn't want you near. She's scared." "Sweetheart, that's a 500-pound predator," Marcus said gently, trying to steady his tone. "She's unpredictable. You need to move away from her." But Nova didn't look unpredictable. She looked terrified and protective at once, as if the small girl in the pink coat was the only thing keeping her from unraveling completely. Another figure hurried toward them. Nurse Helen Ortiz, a petite woman in her late 50s with a soft face framed by graying black curls. Helen had worked at Aspen Ridge Medical Center for nearly 20 years, known for her warm humor and ability to comfort even the most anxious patients. She clutched a medical kit to her chest, but when she saw Nova's massive body guarding Lily, she halted abruptly. "Oh, dear Lord," she murmured. Rebecca stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Lily, but not pulling her away. She stared at Nova's belly, swollen, tense, unmistakably carrying life. "She's pregnant," Rebecca said, her voice breaking with sudden understanding. Marcus's expression hardened. "Then we need animal control even more. A pregnant wild cat is 10 times more dangerous." But Rebecca shook her head, her olive skin paling under the fluorescent lights. "If they tranquilize her in this condition, she won't survive. Neither will the cubs." Marcus hesitated. His training told him to follow protocol. His instincts told him everyone in this room might die if they made a wrong move. But something in the scene, this trembling girl, this collapsing creature placing all its hope in a child, created a tension he didn't know how to measure. The moment several other staff members tried to approach with syringes, Nova pulled herself upright, staggering, and dragged her injured paw after Lily like a shadow refusing to be separated from its source. The warning growl deepened, but the moment Lily stepped closer, Nova melted into stillness, lowering her head like a bow of surrender. The contrast was unmistakable. Fear toward everyone else, unwavering trust toward the little girl. "Mom," Lily whispered, brushing her fingers against Nova's cheek. "She wants us to help. She picked us." Rebecca stared at her daughter, at the tiny hand glowing pink inside her mitten, and then at the great wounded creature whose fate now rested in a child's gentleness. "Do you trust her?" Rebecca asked, voice barely audible. Lily nodded slowly. "She trusted me first." Something shifted inside Rebecca, fear giving way to resolve. "Then we do this," she said firmly. "No animal control, not yet." Marcus blinked. "Rebecca, you cannot be serious." "She'll die waiting for them," Rebecca cut in. "And so will the babies." Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. The logic was brutal and correct. Snow leopards were ghost-like guardians of the mountains, solitary, elusive, painfully endangered. Losing even one was a tragedy. Losing 2 or 3 unborn cubs was unthinkable. Helen took a shaky breath. "The surgical suite is empty tonight. We could try." It wasn't a confident suggestion, but it was a hopeful one, and hope was something the hospital desperately needed. Slowly, cautiously, with Lily walking inches from Nova's shoulder, they guided the snow leopard down the hallway. Every nurse they passed gasped. A janitor nearly dropped his mop. The sleek overhead lights shone across Nova's wounded form, illuminating her suffering and quiet dignity. When they reached the operating room, something miraculous happened. Nova hesitated only briefly before stepping forward on her own. With a weary groan, she hauled her heavy body onto the steel table, turned her flank toward them, and exposed her injured paw willingly, as though offering her life to the humans she had chosen. Lily rested her small hand on Nova's head. The snow leopard leaned into her touch. Rebecca stood at the table, gloved hands trembling around a scalpel. And at that fragile, breathless moment, Nova pressed her forehead into Lily's lap like a final anchor of trust. The storm outside had grown monstrous, its howl rising and falling like the cry of some unseen beast prowling just beyond the glass walls of the hospital. Wind hammered against the emergency wing, carrying flurries of snow that slapped the windows so hard the staff flinched each time. Within the small, brightly lit surgical suite, the world narrowed to 4 souls: Rebecca, Lily, Dr. Marcus Hale, and Nova, the snow leopard, whose life hung by a thread. The overhead surgical lamp buzzed softly, casting an icy glow over the steel table. Nova's great body sprawled across it, her chest heaving in uneven waves. Her silver eyes flickered open and closed, clouded with pain, but still locked onto the small girl standing beside her. Lily Parker, tiny in her pink coat, kept both hands gently pressed against Nova's head. The girl's golden curls spilled across her shoulders as she leaned in, whispering soft, shivering comforts, the way a child would soothe a frightened puppy. Her voice was fragile, trembling, yet filled with a warmth that cut through the sterile air. "It's okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere," she murmured. Rebecca Parker stood near the leopard's flank, scrubs hastily thrown over her red coat, her breath tight with fear. Though trained in emergency care from past volunteer work, this was nothing like dealing with injured hikers or broken limbs. This was raw, primal risk. Yet her hands, though trembling, remained steady because her daughter was watching, and because Nova had placed her entire soul in their hands. Dr. Marcus Hale prepared the instruments. His movements were precise, controlled, but his jaw was clenched tight. The stubble lining his face was darker under stress, and strands of his brown hair clung damply to his forehead from sweat. Marcus was a man who carried responsibility like armor, but even he couldn't hide the anxiety humming beneath his skin tonight. Still haunted by the avalanche that took his rescue partner years ago, Marcus had vowed never again to lose someone in his care. He would not let that vow break tonight. Not for this creature fighting silently on the table, and not for the little girl whose faith had brought them all here. "Scalpel," he said quietly. But it wasn't an order. It was a plea for calm. Rebecca nodded. She lifted the blade. The storm shrieked outside, rattling the glass so violently it sounded like claws dragging across the building. The lights flickered. Lily gasped. And then Rebecca's scalpel touched flesh. Nova let out a strangled growl, the sound vibrating along the metal table. Not a roar of aggression, but fear. Pain. A helpless, choking sound that silenced everyone. Instead of snapping her jaws, Nova pressed her head deeper into Lily's palms, as if begging the child to hold her together. "She's scared," Lily whispered, tears flooding her blue eyes. "Phones. Mom, she's so scared." That was all Rebecca needed to steady herself. She began the quatsang, incision, and blood poured out in a sudden, frightening rush, dark, hot, and too much all at once. Lily began to cry softly, clinging to Nova's ears. The leopard, astonishingly, shifted just enough to nudge the girl's cheek with her cold, damp nose, a gesture of comfort, a mother soothing a child. "Easy, easy," Marcus breathed, blotting the wound and guiding Rebecca's trembling hands. "You're doing fine. You're doing just fine." The arrowhead was barbed, buried cruelly between tendons. With each delicate cut Rebecca made, Nova's body quivered. The storm roared louder, as if echoing her pain. Lily's small sobs filled the room. Marcus leaned closer, eyes narrowed, pupils blown wide with concentration. Helen Ortiz peeked through the door at times, unable to stay away. Her warm face paled with worry, but her presence steady, offering silent courage. After what felt like eternity, Rebecca exhaled a shaky breath. "I see it. I almost have it." One last careful pull, and the broken arrow slipped free. Blood surged again before slowing to a steady trickle. Marcus instantly moved in, flushing the area, cleaning deep infection with meticulous precision. He stitched the torn flesh while Rebecca wiped her brow with a trembling wrist. Lily sniffled, her tears dropping onto Nova's fur. Nova gave one final shudder and then collapsed into stillness, her breathing shallow and weakening. "We need to move her," Marcus said urgently. They shifted Nova onto a wheeled gurney, no simple task with her weight, and pushed her toward an old, unused room down the hall. The room had once stored equipment, but had long fallen out of use. Helen helped them quickly layer it with thick blankets and heating pads. Lily climbed onto the floor beside the Leopard, her small body curling into Nova's thick fur. Nova, though exhausted and slipping into unconsciousness, managed to nuzzle Lily's golden curls with the faintest ghost of affection. Time stretched. The storm outside refused to calm, its wind thrashing the windows like impatient hands. Rebecca, exhausted but unable to rest, checked Nova's vitals again and again. When she finally began to relax, something caught her eye. A stain. Darker than the blood from Nova's paw, on her belly. Rebecca's breath caught. That injury was new, different. From inside. She knelt down, fingers trembling as she pressed gently along Nova's lower abdomen. The snow leopard twitched weakly. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Oh no," Rebecca whispered. "Her babies." Her heart lurched with dread. And just then, the storm hurled a violent blast against the window so fierce the glass nearly buckled, erupting the room into a frenzy of wind and fear. Dawn arrived without light. The storm had swallowed the sunrise whole, leaving Aspen Ridge wrapped in a bruised gray darkness that seeped into every hallway of the hospital. Snow slammed against the windows in violent waves, and icy wind moaned through the vents as if the mountains themselves were calling for Nova. In the dim storage room turned makeshift sanctuary, Nova stirred. Her tail flicked weakly against the blankets. Her breath hitched. Then she pushed herself upright, her great body trembling so violently that the metal frame beneath her creaked. Lily Parker awoke instantly. The 8-year-old blinked through sleep, curls tousled, pastel pink coat still wrapped around her like a small shield. Nova gave a low, wavering sound, a mixture of agony and pleading, as if begging someone to understand something she could no longer hide. The moment Lily saw the way Nova's abdomen tightened, her eyes flew wide. "Mom! Mom!" she cried, scrambling to her knees. She's gonna have her babies!" Rebecca Parker rushed into the room, her red coat thrown hastily over scrubs, hair messy from exhaustion. Her face, usually poised and immaculate, now carried dark circles and the worried tension of a woman forced far outside her realm of expertise. "Okay, honey," she said breathlessly. "Stay with her. Don't leave her side." Despite the fear knotting in her stomach, Rebecca moved quickly, guided by instinct and the fragments of training she'd gained through volunteer emergency work. She grabbed warm blankets, adjusted the heating unit until the room glowed with soft orange warmth, and pulled it closer to Nova's flank. Nova lowered herself onto the floor beside Lily, her massive head pushed into the child's hands with surprising force, an act that felt less like dependence and more like a frightened prayer. Lily stroked her cheek. "I'm here," she whispered. Outside, the storm roared like a living thing, hurling snow and wind so fiercely that the window panes groaned under the pressure. Just as the wind reached a screaming pitch, Nova's first contraction hit. She let out a deep, guttural cry, the kind that shook the walls and froze the blood. Marcus Hale entered then, drawn by the sound. His broad frame filled the doorway, his face shadowed with dread and responsibility. He had changed into fresh scrubs. His strong hands, though steady, bore the tremor of a man who had seen enough tragedies to know how fast life could slip away. "She's in active labor," he murmured, kneeling beside Rebecca. "We need to be ready for complications. Snow leopards don't usually birth under this much stress." "She doesn't have a choice," Rebecca whispered back. "Tonight, this is all she has." Nova's breathing quickened. Her muscles knotted. And then, a tiny cry pierced the room. The first cub slid into Rebecca's waiting hands. Small, wet, impossibly delicate, pure white like freshly fallen snow, Marcus quickly wrapped the newborn in a towel, clearing its airways with gentle precision. The cub let out a soft, whimpering mewl. Lily gasped. "She's beautiful." Nova strained again. 20 agonizing minutes later, the second cub arrived, slightly larger, trembling, its faint cries echoing like whispers of life. Marcus placed the cub against Nova's belly. She immediately curled herself around them both, licking their fur in long, careful strokes. Then something incredible happened. Nova nudged both newborns toward Lily. Slow, deliberate, intentional. Lily recoiled in shock, pressing a hand to her mouth. She wants me to hold them." Tears shimmered in Rebecca's eyes. "Go on, honey." Lily extended her trembling hands. The newborns wriggled against her palms, nuzzling into the warmth of her skin as if she were part of their world, accepted, chosen. The sight was breathtaking, ancient, sacred, something pulled straight from a forgotten myth. And it lasted only a moment. A distant engine rumbled outside. Then a shout. Then more. Rebecca froze. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Through the storm's howl came the unmistakable blare of a truck backing up. Flashlights cut briefly across the snow. "No," Rebecca whispered. "Not now." Marcus stood up sharply. "Animal control." Before anyone could react, heavy boots slammed against the pavement outside. Voices shouted orders. Metal equipment clattered. Someone yelled, "Tranks ready!" The door to the old storage room burst open with a violent crack. 2 animal control officers stepped inside, bundled in thick winter gear. The first was a burly man in his late 30s, with a thick brown beard, stocky build, and a face weathered by years in the Colorado wilderness. His name patch read Tanner Griggs, a field officer notorious for his strict adherence to procedure. His cold, steel-gray eyes scanned the room with practiced authority. The second was a tall, thin woman in her 20s with pale blonde hair tied in a tight braid. Her name tag read Emily Sloan, a rookie whose timid posture betrayed her inexperience. Both held tranquilizer rifles. Emily's hands shook. Tanner's did not. "Step away from the animal," Tanner barked. "Now!" But they never reached Lily. Because Nova, the exhausted, wounded mother who had nearly died on the surgical table, found one last reserve of strength. With a low, thunderous growl, she pushed herself onto her feet and moved between Lily and the officers, her body forming a trembling but unbreakable wall. Her silver eyes burned with warning. Emily gasped, stumbling back. Tanner raised his rifle. And the chapter ends here. Breath locked, danger imminent, the storm screaming against the glass like a prophecy. Chaos had erupted so suddenly that the hospital staff had barely understood what they were witnessing. The storm still hammered the windows like a relentless percussion. But inside the small storage room, the air was charged with something far more dangerous than weather. Tanner Griggs, the burly animal control officer, kept his tranquilizer rifle raised. His thick brown beard framed a jaw set with stubbornness, and his gray eyes showed the detached focus of a man trained to neutralize threats without hesitation. Emily Sloan, the young rookie beside him, clutched her own rifle, but her trembling fingers betrayed her fear. Nova stood between them and Lily, a trembling, blood-stained shield of muscle and maternal rage. Lily clung to Nova's fur, her small, pink-sleeved arms wrapped around the snow leopard's neck, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her pastel coat glowed softly under the flickering emergency lights, making her seem impossibly fragile beside the wounded predator she adored. Rebecca stepped forward before Tanner could lift his weapon higher. Her red coat swirled around her like a banner of warning, her long, wet hair loose from hours of chaos. She planted herself directly between the rifles and the animal she refused to surrender. Her voice rang sharp and cold. "Nobody touches my daughter or this leopard." Tanner's jaw flexed. "Ma'am, that animal is a deadly threat. We don't have time for—" "She just gave birth," Rebecca snapped. "She's weak, she's scared, and she protected my child, so you will not treat her like some monster." More footsteps echoed down the corridor. Dr. Marcus Hale appeared first, sweat-soaked scrubs clinging to his tall frame, hazel eyes blazing with rare fury. Helen Ortiz followed close behind, her round face flushed with indignation, curls bouncing with each determined step. Behind them came more staff, nurses, orderlies, even the janitor with his mop still dripping onto the floor. It was a makeshift army, but their expressions were firm. Marcus stepped beside Rebecca. "You're not taking her. Not today." Tanner looked from Marcus to Rebecca to the group forming behind them. He saw the collective resolve, ordinary people transformed by a night no training manual had prepared them for. He lowered his rifle an inch, but his voice remained cold. "If that animal hurts someone, it's on all of you." "She won't!" Lily cried. "She saved me!" Emily Sloan looked at the child's tear-streaked face, at the tiny newborn cubs pressed against Nova's belly, and her rigid posture softened, her pale eyebrows knit with worry rather than aggression. "Tanner, maybe we should call it in," she whispered. "This isn't what we expected." Tanner exhaled roughly, tension loosening from his shoulders. With a final glare, he signaled retreat. "We'll be back when the storm clears. Just keep her contained." When they left, silence fell, heavy, shaky, full of relief. The hospital staff dispersed gradually, leaving Rebecca, Lily, and Marcus to comfort Nova through the rest of the night. Weeks drifted by like soft falling snow. Winter continued to cling to Aspen Ridge, but inside the hospital's makeshift sanctuary, warmth grew each day. Nova healed slowly. Her fur regained its luster, her limp faded, and the fierce light in her silver eyes returned. The cubs, two tiny white bundles, grew strong and playful, pouncing on everything that moved, especially the ends of Lily's mittens. Lily visited every morning and evening, her laughter ringing like bells as the cubs tumbled around her. Nova watched over them with regal calm, often resting her head on Lily's lap as if recognizing the child as part of her small family. Rebecca, though always composed, could not hide her soft smiles whenever she found her daughter curled up beside Nova, reading picture books to the restless cubs. Marcus, too, checked on them daily. The hardened lines of his face softened every time he entered the room. Healing, literal and emotional, seemed to blossom in the presence of the white leopard. But the day they all feared eventually arrived. Nova was well enough to return to the wild. Wildlife officials, different ones this time, kinder, respectful, prepared a discreet release in the mountains. When the moment came, Lily wrapped her arms around Nova's neck one last time, burying her face in the thick white fur. Tears stained her cheeks like melting snow. "I'll miss you," she whispered. Nova dipped her head, pressing her forehead firmly against Lily's in a gesture ancient and sacred, the snow leopard's embrace. The cubs bounded around Lily's boots, nuzzling her legs before scampering after their mother. Nova paused once, turning back. Her silver eyes held gratitude deeper than language. Then she vanished into the dense whiteness of the forest, her cubs flanking her like small shadows. Lily cried softly the entire walk back to the car. Rebecca held her close. Time passed. Life resumed. But Winter had one more secret to unfold. One late evening, as Rebecca and Lily left the hospital after a routine visit, the moon cast a pale glow across the snowy parking lot. The air was silent, eerily so. Then Lily stopped, breath catching. A white silhouette stood just beyond the first lamppost. Nova, alone, strong, magnificent. She stepped forward with quiet, deliberate grace and lowered her head. Something small clinked against the ground. A tiny milk tooth, translucent and perfect. A gift, a promise. Lily dropped to her knees, hugging Nova fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered through tears. Nova lingered only a moment longer before turning away, slipping into the trees with the elegance of a ghost made of snow and moonlight. Lily watched her go, holding the tiny tooth tight in her mitten. And both she and her mother understood the truth. Some bonds, born in blood, fear, and kindness, never fade. Somewhere, in the snow-crowned mountains, a white spirit would always be watching. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with trumpets from heaven. Sometimes they come quietly, on soft paws wrapped in white fur, through a blizzard no one expected. Nova didn't walk into that hospital by accident. She walked in guided by something greater, something that whispered to a frightened mother and a tiny little girl in a pink coat, "Do not fear, for I am with you." And maybe that's what this whole story reminds us of, that in the hardest nights of our lives, in the storms that shake our walls and test our courage, God still sends help in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes it looks like an answered prayer. Sometimes it looks like a stranger offering kindness. And sometimes It looks like a wounded snow leopard placing her trust in a child. If there is one lesson here, it's this. When we choose compassion, when we protect the weak, defend the innocent, and open our hearts, we become part of God's quiet miracles in this world. So as you finish this story, may God bless you, keep you safe, and fill your days with the same grace that guided Lily and Nova together. May the Lord watch over you and your loved ones, today and always. And if this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps more people find stories of hope, faith, and everyday miracles. May God bless you for being here with us.